listener production.
G'day, it's Rusty here, all set for part 2 of my podcast with Aussie engineer and NASCAR crew chief James Small. If you've arrived at this point and somehow missed part 1, jump back to the library and hit the gas. You'll really enjoy it. From his recollections of the Thunderdome as a young fella and the influence of his dad Les, a well-known figure in Australian motorsport. Karting and some cool titles he picked up as a junior, the promise Larry Perkins made and honoured, the difficult decision to stop chasing the driver dream, but his dedication and commitment to being a winner on pit row on the other side of pit wall, one that would lead him to filling big shoes as a crew chief at one of the biggest teams in NASCAR. We begin part 2 with his first job stateside with Richard Childress Racing, a team with a lot of history, and James has fond memories of RCR when he fell in love with NASCAR as a young bloke.
Yeah, and that was, a huge draw card for me. Dale Earnhardt was my favourite NASCAR driver. A lot of my go-kart racing, I wore the number 3. And, it was just an iconic organisation. And obviously, they'd had a lot of success. And, even at the time, they still had Kevin Harvick there and they were, contending for championships and race wins. So they were still, a pretty major force in the NASCAR world. And, just going there for the interview and the scale of, just the compound that they're in and all the different shops and everything. And it just it blew me away. It's the same when you come to any of these teams over here. It's just the scale is, off the charts. So, I was walking around probably a little bit like a race fan and, thinking how good's this, but, is very lucky that, they gave me an opportunity to get my foot in the door.
The enormity of the operation, I think, grabs everybody. Leet, if you took me on like a penny tour through a number of the different outfits, and it's like going into suburbs. You need a car to get around to every aspect of it. And I would imagine, mate, from what you've shared here, that the museum that RCR has dedicated to Dale would have been a must-see for you.
Yeah, that's for sure. If anybody's ever going to come over and they have to drive up to welcome, it's a little bit away, but it's worth it. The amount of cars and the history in there, and it's actually one of the best museums I've been in. It's really cool to see. So it's just, I don't know, it's just surreal still. The museum's based in kind of, their original shop, where when they won those championships before they kind of started expanding. So that's really cool just to see the progression of where they started and then to the rest of the campus around there. So it's must do.
Let's get our teeth more into NASCAR in a second. Can I ask the obvious question though, James? You'd had success with FPR. How did they take the news that you were gonna head stateside? Was that with their blessing? How did that whole discussion go?
No, it went well. I think I told Mark first. Actually, I wanted to tell him first. I think I can't even remember how I did it. I either rang him and we went and had lunch. I think I rang him and told him. And he was really disappointed. But, he was also, it's a great opportunity. And then Tim Edwards, I went to him and told him, and, he spent a lot of time overseas, obviously with Jordan and all that. And he knew, what the attraction was. And, he was more than happy for me to go and, attempt to do this. And, I almost went back there after a couple of years, to be honest. That's another story. I was a little bit despondent at the time. And, Mark kept ringing me and trying to get me to go back, and it was they were all good about it. I still talk to some of them to these days. People I work with, and we still keep in contact. So
we have a mutual friend, an old colleague of mine is Tim Hodges. We worked together at Channel 10 back in the day. Now he says for me to ask you that I am, as I talk to you now, I spend a lot of my time in NZ. My wife's a Kiwi. And so I get on pretty well with Greg Murphy, who's more or less a neighbour, not quite over the fence from each other, but we're not far away. And Tim reminded me that you took Murph and Hodgie and a few others through RCR in 2016 before the Indy 500. But I think you'd showed all the Richard Childress guys the famous Murphy Ambrose fight at the mountain,
yes.
had you? Is that right?
Yeah, I had. Yeah.
So they all knew. They all knew,
yeah.
didn't they?
Yeah. So I, and then as soon as he came around, they just knew. They loved it. So that was, I forgot I did that. So that was a real pisser. So because Marcus, was he still there at the time, or maybe he'd gone back that year? But they knew he meant business.
Awesome. Tell us about more of the progression now from what you did in the early days for Richard Childress and how you found the sport, the whole experience.
Yeah, so it was very different, what I was used to. We were very kind of systematic, very. And now, let me put this in the context. This is different at all different teams over here. There's different cultures and whatever. And I think a lot of the teams now are more not engineering driven, like kind of scientific based, kind of aspects of it. But there I was just kind of questioning a lot of things. I knew I had a lot to learn, so I wasn't saying anything. And, we would go testing and I'm like, this doesn't, make sense. Like, we're not really using a proper process here. Like, I'm a very process driven person and, we're just slinging from the hip, changing this, changing that. And so that was a little bit, hard to get used to. But, I was lucky I got to work with, that first year on the 27 with Paul. It was Slugger Labby, who was the crew chief. And, he's a old school dude from up north, but, he's a racer. And, I learned a lot from him. We had our disagreements, in the way we did certain things, but I think we both respected each other and he respected that. But I learned a lot just on the nuances of NASCAR, the technical inspection process and, how you're always trying to flirt in the gray areas and, get things through. And, it's a very different way of going racing to what it was in Australia. I think Australia, everybody's a little more gentlemanly like, and by the book, and maybe it's changed, but maybe not pushing things as hard, it's just, if you don't race like that over here, you get left behind, and that's just the culture and the mentality. And, I learned a hell of a lot about that. But yeah, it was also a little difficult, just trying to wrap my head around, certain aspects of why they would do things that didn't make sense to me. But, being the new guy, it took a while before I started to question things. And I had a lot to learn. It's still a car with, a mass with four wheels trying to go around the corner as fast as possible. But there's so many different nuances to, oval racing and, and just how the tracks change. And it's just, there was a lot to learn. So I was like a sponge, my first year. And, I'm grateful that I got to work, with some of the people that I did and just learn from them, because that's still helps me, to this day. And, Slugger and I are still really good friends, and, he works at Toyota now. So it's a good person to have in my corner.
How did you go with the cultural shift? Are you teaching them Aussie slang? Are you absorbing sort of American, little things, Z and Z and so on? What were you like there?
It's still like, they used to give me so much shit for like just some, even like how I'd say numbers like 13 or whatever, like in the rubbish bin or whatever, and like it's the trash can, and like even like things like, it took me a while, like it's not the bonnet anymore, it's the hood, or it's not the boot, it's the trunk, and like all these little things. And we definitely taught them, and still to this day, Aussie slang is a big part of our team and all the teams I've worked with. And they've got a lot of words they've learnt from me that probably are way too inappropriate for this podcast.
We can always recognise your voice in the broadcast too, mate, when we hear you over the airwaves, which is really cool stuff. You talked before, just before we get to sort of Furniture Row Racing and being based in Denver and so on. Did you have that period of uncertainty around this point where FPR was still ringing? When did that happen and why were you sort of in that funk?
I think the first year it was really hard. It was a big culture shock, just moving from, we lived inner city Melbourne, Kat and I, and we moved to Winston-Salem. We weren't living in Charlotte. And so Winston-Salem is probably an hour 15 north of Charlotte. It was closer to RCR. It was small town. And it was hard, Kat couldn't work. I was away a lot. There was still a lot of testing back in those days. So I was away nearly every week for, 3 or 4 days at least. And then obviously racing and it was hard for her to make friends and, it's just hard to fit in. Like, even going to the grocery store up there and like people would be like, what? It was a lot to take in. And, it's just us and the dog and, Kat couldn't work because of the visa thing at the start. So it was really hard on her. And, I honestly wasn't enjoying it as much as I thought I would, I loved the whole racing side, but I just couldn't, it wasn't that I wasn't clicking with them. It was just, I didn't feel like it was the way I would go about doing things. Like, and it kind of, you couldn't really say anything, but it's just like, so all of those things was like, it was difficult. And it was like, I think probably 8 weeks after I'd been here, Slugger sent me out, initially to do more testing, and Furniture Row were technical partners with us. And I met a couple of guys there, Cole Hearn and Matt Faulkner, and who were engineers at the time. And, Cole was Canadian and Matt was from, out that way. And we just got on like a house on fire. And I'm like, these are the people, these are the people I want to be with. Like, we thought the same. We thought about engineering the same, about how we would do things and all of that. So I became quite good friends with them, and that kind of gave me a little bit of hope that maybe one day I could go and work with them. And, but yeah, it was like, that year was hard. And I think at the time, I was talking to Penske again about going back to Australia to potentially, maybe that was a year after, because Scotty was all on me about trying to go out there. When they were going to start up their team and all that. So I don't know, it was a weird couple of years and I just didn't really like living up there, and there was a multitude of reasons. But we kept sticking it out. So, I think those days made us a lot stronger people and helped us, understand ourselves better. And, we still made some good friends from up there eventually, but ultimately I think it made us realize, when we did move out to Denver, like, that's when it finally started feeling like home over here.
Having someone like Kat, because that is, the tour is a grind, mate, way more than Australia, way tougher than Australia. Having someone like her as a backstop is hugely important, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, big time. I couldn't have done anything, that I've done without her, and I'm just thankful for everything. She's kept me on the straight and narrow and looked after me, and, and I'm definitely not the most easiest person to be around, and, it all kind of worked out. And I'm glad, eventually, we got somewhere, where she could have a better time as well, out in Colorado. And, that's when I think, that was the turning point of us being here and deciding that, this is the place for us for the rest of our lives.
Awesome. We'll get to that in a second. You mentioned Scotty a moment ago. You're obviously talking about Scotty McLaughlin trying to lure you across to the Penske Supercars thing when it really took off with DJR. Yeah,
so because Scotty came and stayed with me, what year would it have been? He came 2015. So I think whenever he came over for his interview, when he went, because he came over and we went to RCR. I took him to RCR and I'm like, this guy, he wants to do some Xfinity races. I introduced him to Mike Dillon, who is Richard's son-in-law, and and then we're talking about it and about what what it would cost to do and all of that, and then I I don't know why they wouldn't go for it, but what they. But then eventually he went down there, I think the next day, and he had his meeting with Tim and Cindric, and that all kind of took off, and
way it went.
yeah, and I think he came across maybe the year before. He was at Loudon or whatever, but it worked out perfectly for him, and he's had a stellar career, hasn't he?
James, you took the words right out of my mouth. Stellar Scotty, I call him. And his journey is all documented in his episode with Rusty, including a special meeting with the captain.
So Roger later on decides to play in the sport, and the dots would ultimately join that you would be a part of that outfit. Wonderful new chapter for you. Did the captain, he's an automotive industry icon, motor racing legend in terms of what he's achieved as a team owner. What was the phone call like? And can you remember what he said?
Yeah, I remember seeing the number, +1, and I was like, well, this could be important. So I answered it, and I had Tim's number, and he said, yeah, Scott, it's Roger Penske. And basically, this is a little bit down the line when we had been in discussions, but Roger's always the final say in regards to his drivers, I'm guessing. So he gave me a call and just said, this is what we're about and all that sort of thing. I would love to have you on our team. And it was a very short, sharp, and it was just very, very surreal and something that I'll never forget. But it was funny when this is a lot before this, but 2015 at New Zealand was the first time I actually met Roger, and he came out and he actually sent me an email, and I absolutely crapped my pants when he sent it. I was like, because I didn't actually have my phone turned on, and I actually missed the email, but he came and saw me. And he was like, oh, how'd you like the shop? And I'm like, I was ducking for cover because I hadn't told anyone I'd been there or anything like that. And I was like, oh, it was all right. Let's go talk over here. But from that day on, he was amazing. And then, obviously, when discussions got serious about joining DJR Team Penske, it was, crazy to be a part of it.
All right, that's Scott in Rusty's garage. Now back to Rusty.
The Furniture Row racing thing is worth touching on. You talked about it being people that you connected with and so on. They were, because of, if memory serves, the sponsor and the passion for Denver and the want to operate in that place. They had you all up there, and that kind of meant that you were one out and one wide of the hub that is Charlotte. But in the same sense too, it meant you had this kind of really tight bond, all of you, which you sort of alluded to with Cole and things like that before, didn't you? Yeah, no,
it was way different out there. It's like if you were out there, you wanted to be out there, and it was like a kind of like a us against the world mentality. And one difficult thing about being in Charlotte is that everybody knows everybody, and everybody talks, and people probably go out and drink and, start talking about racing, and secrets don't always stay secrets. And, none of that happened out there. And, it was just it was a small little shop. It was honestly smaller than most V8 supercar, shops. And we had a super passionate owner in Barney Visser, the guy that owned Furniture Row. And it was, the culture there was just anything. It was different to anything I've experienced, and we were very lucky that, at the time, until we shut down when money was a problem. Money wasn't really an option before then. We had the ability to, get what we want and spend what we wanted, and they didn't leave, any stone unturned. And, we were lucky we had the technical partnership with Toyota and Joe Gibbs Racing. So essentially, we were taking what, they were kind of giving us and kind of making it better. We bodied all our own cars out there and had, great people doing that. And it's just different. Everything was more efficient, like you didn't have, 500 people working there, you could just make a decision on the spot, and then that's what we're doing. You didn't need to have 16 meetings about it and have everybody agree and then have it filter through. And it was, it was just much easier. And obviously there's a lot of challenges being a small team, but there's also a lot of benefits.
The David and Goliath stuff too, mate. I mean, to win a championship there with what is effectively the smallest team, I mean, that is just enormous. How does that even happen in the world of NASCAR that you now, are immersed in?
I think it's just great people. It's obviously the connection with JGR was huge, in terms of technical support, and, they developed some really good cars over the year, and their aero department, and still is. Our aero department is immense. We have the greatest people in there, and that was, so much of the game, especially back then when it was, the rules were obviously a little more open than what they are today. So, being able to take that, and then, there are different processes, Furniture Row had just in how they went about, setting their cars up, and, using the simulation tools and all of that, really we were ahead of the game of a lot of people. And that was one of the, big advantages I think we had at that time in trying to get it, optimizing everything and getting the cars better. So, that paid dividends. And now, everybody's kind of caught up, and, the things we were doing back then, helped JGR and Toyota develop, their programs more. So, thankfully none of that work we did really, it's all come to fruition now, really.
And you get a chance in, I want to say in 2017 to do some crew chief stuff too as well. It was Eric Jones, wasn't it? And you actually had some success, mate. I think there was a 10th at Watkins Glen and maybe a 3rd at Michigan and so on. So that was a cool step up for you as well.
It was cool. Yeah, that was a cool opportunity. And, I was just lucky the crew chief at the time, Chris Gale, got suspended. I can't even remember what for. I think it was truck arm gap or something. I can't even remember. But, and that was, a great opportunity. It was funny because that was the same 2 weekends that Diff was commentating. So on NBC when they were calling him the English guy. But yeah, we had a great time. And, that weekend after at Michigan, the second race I did, we were running 1-2. The 78 was winning with Martin. We were second, and we were going to have, Furniture Row's first ever 1-2. And then a late caution came out, and we had a green white checker at the end, and, it fell apart, and we finished second and third. But I can't imagine what the plane ride home would have been like that day if we'd pulled that off.
If you'd won it. At the height of the powers of the whole Furniture Row operations, mate, the owner shuts the team. You're basically, in a sense, out of work. How big a shock was that for you all?
Yeah, it was. It sucked. It was bad because obviously in 2017 we were 2 cars, and then went back to 1 car in 2018. And a lot of that all stemmed, I think, from the Carl Edwards decision, when he had that shock retirement, and I think there's so many different stories, and I don't really know which one is correct even to this day. But, I think that put a spanner in the works, of where Toyota drivers were going to be. And, they had to find, essentially Suarez had to go to JGR to fill that void in the 19 at the time. So really we only had the budget to run, the 1 car. And I think after Barney had won that championship, he'd accomplished what he had wanted, and he'd put in so much money over the years, of his own money and family money. And, the children, his kids were coming up in the business and starting to, want to do different things with Furniture Row. And I think the racing, had a little less of, the priority. It became a little bit more of a drain on the, on the bank balance. And we had good funding, with Bass Pro and 5 Hour Energy and Auto Owners. And then really the nail in the coffin was we got a phone call on 5 Hour, we're going to pull out. And that was like a $10 to $11 million hole that we had to fill. And they tried really hard, and, we thought that maybe it was gonna happen and we could keep going. But, ultimately just they weren't able to put a deal together between all the parties. And I think I was actually back out in Australia in 2018. It was like August after the Bristol race. I had to go back to get a new visa before I started my green card stuff. And Cole rang me and he's like, it's done. It's definitely not going to happen. And I'm like, oh, gee. So, like, that was really, really disappointing because, it's just like, okay, what now? Gonna have to move back to North Carolina. And that kind of really flipped all of our worlds upside down because, that affected everybody that worked there, And, we kept going for the rest of the year. And, we came down to within a handful of laps of winning the championship again in 2018.
Unbelievable.
I think, that caution didn't come out at the end. We would have won, but the 22 was just better on a short run that night, and he passed us, and we finished second. So it was like a really hard way to go out, with such a great group of people, and I'll never forget those years.
You did, in the wake of all that, get some pretty good job offers, and you picked Joe Gibbs Racing. So for people that are listening that aren't maybe necessarily deep into NASCAR, I mean, Joe is a sporting icon. I mean, we're talking 3 Super Bowls as coach with Washington. He then goes car racing with success. I think there's been 2-wheel bike stuff as well, dirt bike stuff. I mean, huge opportunity there, mate, and with a natural connection, I guess, to what was Furniture Row before in some respects too, hey?
Yeah, that was just, it was such an easy transition, really. And we were lucky. We could have all gone and worked, as you said, at other teams, but we wanted to also stay together, and the core group of us, came across. I think there was probably 9 or 10 of us in total, all through different positions, just not on the 19 team that came across to that car with Martin. And, we were lucky we were able to continue it on. And, obviously JGR at the time, there was like 500 people, you know what I mean?
Unreal.
Or maybe even more back then. That was kind of at the height of its people back then in, 2019 before the whole pandemic stuff changed a lot of things, but, it was a great opportunity, and, we knew so many people, the processes were the same. It was really a smooth transition. And the hardest thing was just, moving back here again to North Carolina. And, my wife actually stayed out there for a couple of years just because she had her friends and, she had her career and job that, so we decided that, we had to move apart for this to work, and that was hard. I was living in a little box apartment by myself with a beanbag and a desk and a bed, and that's how I lived for 2 years. But, I made sure when I did my deal with Joe Gibbs, I'm like, you need to sponsor me for a green card.
Excellent.
And that was one of the big things, because then it gave us the stability that we could stay here for forever. So,
what's Joe like? Take people there. I mean, he sounds like an amazing leader. How much do you have to do with him? Does he treat it like a footy team in some ways?
He's an amazing individual. Like, he's, even to this day, he's around 80 years old now, whatever. Like, he's in there every day, and he's in the thick of everything, and he does not slow down. And if he's not at the shop, he's on his plane somewhere visiting a sponsor or shaking hands somewhere or doing a talk somewhere. Like, his work ethic is out of control. And, he's getting up there now, and, he has a lot of stories. He'll stop by, and every time he comes into the office, we'll hear a different football story, and it's cool to, relive some of those things with him. And it's just, he's had an amazing career, and obviously he's super passionate, and he cares about his people, which is a massive thing. They don't just don't talk about it. They actually, they do things to help their people and all their charities and everything. They're just great people and a great family. And, it's hard for him. He's now lost both of his sons. He's the last one standing. I just don't wouldn't want to be in his shoes. It's just the way he just keeps going every day and inspiring everybody is, it's incredible.
Can you share with us, mate, post-COVID, what the enormity of that team is still like? I mean, I think there's still 4 cars in the main series. How many people at base, planes that the team own to sort of transport everything? I mean, it's a big, big deal still, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's massive. So, we still have, 4 Cup cars. We still do all the bodies and everything for the 2311 cars. So effectively preparing 6 Cup cars. There's 3 Xfinity cars, an ARCA car. We run the test team for Toyota. Obviously, all the wind tunnel stuff for Toyota. There's still, last time I think I got told there's still around 400 people, here. I'm probably wrong on that, but that's what I got told the other week. But there's a lot of people, and it's just a people business. You need the best people, and we're lucky. There's just so many talented people in each department that helps us, turn out the cars we do every week.
Have you become a better kind of people manager as a result of all that? I mean, you studied engineering, but it becomes a people game, James, doesn't it?
It does, and I think I've gotten a lot better. I don't know. I can't critique myself, but I try to do my best, and it's just one thing I always make sure it's got to be fun. You know what I mean? Like you've got to be having fun. The amount of hours and the grind and the amount of time we spend with each other. Most of us see each other more than we see our families. It's a difficult sport, and we always make sure we're having fun and joking around. And I think we're the envy of a lot of teams, especially in our building. Like everyone wants to come and work with us. We've got such a great group of people, and we're all friends. We want to hang out together, and we're all there for each other and support each other. And it's just we have a great culture on our team, and I'm very lucky, just to work with all those people. So I just, my mum always said, always treat people as you want to be treated. So it's, I always try and make sure I listen to that.
Lovely memory, mate. And on your work sort of fun scenario, when I worked with the late Barry Sheen, he would always say before every broadcast we would do, when you would have been there at Supercars and so on, he said, here, let's have a laugh. It always had to be fun. That was his kind of mantra. You mentioned about just what a marathon it is, right? Like how long the season is and so on. Talk strategy for us, if you can, that goes into each event, the game plans for each race, kind of how many playbooks do you have, and how prepared are you? How prepared can you be for every possible outcome in that game?
Yeah, like in terms of that, it's difficult. So, but like on a week, a lot of our weekly work is all, we're pretty much preparing for the race with the way the formats are. Like we have such a short practice. So your whole week and your whole weekend is really set up by what you're doing back in the shop, in terms of all your simulation work and your setup and your decisions you're making there of like where you want the balance to be, what you think the track conditions are going to be, what you think the pace is going to be, then what's the weather going to be, which way is the wind blowing. There's so many little aspects that have such an effect on the performance. And then on top of that, you've got to do all the little things and like for technical inspection, you make sure you're pushing it, you're getting the most out of the car in all these different little areas, because it's just the sum of everything is so tight now. It all just comes down to details, and the sum of all those little details is what can make the difference. And you can make decisions or assumptions during the week that can be right or wrong, and it doesn't matter what happens on Sunday, your car's going to suck. You know what I mean? Like if you so you spend all my time and the engineer's time during the week is just trying to go through all those scenarios just more on a car performance level and setup level. And so that's a big thing. And just having a plan for when you get to the track and when you unload, if the car's doing this, doing that, like what's the most efficient, effective ways, because you have such limited time. And really that's the key part of structuring the week and making sure you have like a smooth and an efficient weekend. And the race stuff and the strategy stuff is very different on a week to week. Kind of, it all depends on where you're going. You have a high fall off track, or if it's going to be a fuel mileage race, and a lot of things can be dictated on where you qualify. That might change the way you do things, and set up decisions you make overnight from Saturday to Sunday. Because just depending on the cars are so traffic sensitive, and there's so many things. Like, you really don't have enough hours in a week, to be honest, to actually go through it all. But it's just the main thing to a successful week is just getting the car right. And then if you have a fast car, the strategy becomes a lot easier. But it's when you're slow that's the problem. That's when you got to do silly stuff.
Tell me about nerves. Tell me about intensity for you, because every call in many ways falls with you. When to pit, how many tyres, how much fuel, what changes to make to the car. That is a hell of a lot of pressure, James.
Yeah, it is. I don't really get nervous. I never really have. But I question myself a lot, or I'm hard on myself, if I feel like I've made, a bad decision or, but yeah, there's a lot going on, and these races are so hard to win, and it can come down to small little things. Like, you've got to be thinking ahead. What's the track going to do here to, when you come in the pit, do I need to adjust, even though I don't have a problem now? Is it going to transition this way? And then, some of these races, there is a lot of strategy in terms, like, there's high fall off races, and it's just like, okay, you're always weighing up the risk versus reward, and, if you need to pit here or pit then, or if you short pit somebody, or what are the problems with that? There's a whole lot going on, and, some of these races are easy and other ones are really difficult. And, you're racing against, 35 other guys that are all trying to outsmart each other. And, there's a lot of competitive cars, and it's just extremely hard to win one of these races. You need to be perfect these days. You need to be good on pit road and call a good race, have good restarts. Like, it's not a straightforward thing at all. So that's why when you win, it's a huge accomplishment,
You get to work with Martin Truex Junior, one of the biggest names in the sport. I think you've been quoted elsewhere as saying he's not the kind of guy that gets stressed. He's certainly not a drama queen. Tell people what Martin Truex Junior is like to work with and what your relationship is like.
There's two Martins. There's 2020, there's 2023 Martin, which he's a whole different beast, but he's a super down to earth guy. Most lovely guy, nicest guy ever. He's always been pretty quiet, kept to himself a lot. Has a couple of Captain and Cokes, and you can't shut him up, and he's hugging you, and but he's such a great dude, and he doesn't. Some drivers think they know everything. You know what I mean? Like, he just comes in, he tells us what the car's doing. He knows what a good car needs to feel like, or, if we're at a certain track, he knows what he needs the car to do at Richmond, or he knows what the car needs to do at Darlington, or what it's going to do in the race. You know what I mean? Like, it makes it quite easy to work with him, and he just tells us what to do, like, what he needs to do better, and obviously we have to prompt him on all those things, and then he just leaves us alone. You know what I mean? Like, he has trust in his team and he's always been like this, that we'll figure it out. And, and he just goes and does his own thing and rolls back up the next day. So, that side is, it's very, very easy to work with. And, he's just one of the guys. He just loves being there with us and hanging out, and, we're all got the same goal and try and work together to make the best car possible. And, he's the most easy driver I've ever worked with, to be honest.
We've talked a bit about the Aussie accent in that paddock. I think there was a great comment in some of the commentary over the weekend from Daytona about you can't miss the Aussie accent when you're on the radio, which we love, mate. tell us about being an Aussie in that club, if you like, in that paddock, and being embraced. I can recall talking to Marcus Ambrose for the podcast and him expressing the importance of kind of being accepted by the club.
Yeah. They still give me shit sometimes. Where were we the other day?
In what way?
Well, we were in a meeting the other day. We were talking about, what was it? They were like, I can't even remember the word. And they're like, oh, that must be the Aussie name for it or something. Like, people look at me and like, what are you talking about? And, no, I'm lucky. They've accepted me. No one, I think they've seen that, I work hard and I can do a good job, a lot of the time. And, people just respect that, I think no matter where you're from or who you are, if you have all those qualities, I think ultimately people that have a clue are going to, accept and, listen and take on your opinions. And, I'm lucky I've been able to work with a lot of really good people everywhere I've been, and they've all been great towards me. And, couldn't ask for anything more.
Can we talk about what it feels like to win one of those races? As a kid who was passionate about the Thunderdome, that had an interest in magazines and things about NASCAR and had been around it, to be a winner, I think, was it Martinsville was your first, wasn't it? Well, what does that feel like, mate?
Martinsville 2020. So it was a weird way to win a race too, because we just came back in and we were obviously the pandemic was on and we were at the track wearing masks and there wasn't any fans and we didn't really have a victory lane, but still it was it was incredible feeling, quite an accomplishment. I still to this day, the most important thing I've done in my career. You've got Bathurst and all that, but coming over here and after everything we'd gone through to get to that point and all of that, it was a huge accomplishment and a day I'll never forget. And to win at Martinsville is just such a cool place. Like I grew up watching all those races, and you saw like Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson, kind of dominate that track for years, and to go and do it and get my first win there was something I'll never forget. So. It would have been a bit more fun if we weren't in masks and could, have a little bit of a party. Yeah.
You don't get to savour it for all that long, do you? Because the tour then moves on next week to something else and you're back into the swing of things. That I'm sure it's a memory that you cherish, mate, but you have to keep moving, don't you?
You do. It's like straight back. You're back to work on Monday and you're working on the next week. There's no time. You savor it for that night and, you go to work on Monday and your day's a lot nicer and you walk around and thank everybody. And, there's a little less pressure that week, but ultimately you kind of forget about it and you move on. It's like you're in a washing machine on a different cycle. It's just the same thing every week. Yeah. You're doing the same things and, you can go from being a hero one week to a complete loser the week after. It's that easy in the sport. And, that's also the beauty. If you have a bad week, you can just put it behind you and you concentrate on the week after and you can go and win again. So you don't have to dwell on it for too long is the cool thing.
How about, though, when you go through a stretch where you don't win? Because it is an ultra-competitive game. And I know there have been times there, mate, where you guys have had, when you look back in other seasons, where you've had a fast car, but maybe just little things weren't right for whatever reason, and that has to be a bit soul-destroying at times too, doesn't it?
It is, and I feel like, I'm sure a lot of teams can say this, but I feel like since working with Martin, there's been so many opportunities. We've had race-winning cars and things go wrong. Like, I feel like we've lost more races than we've won by far, and it's just, it's hard. You put so much effort in every week and you can just one small thing and you walk away on Sunday kind of crushed, And, it's 2020, we won that one race, and then we had a lot of opportunities the rest of the year, and it didn't happen. We weren't, as I said before, you need to be perfect. You can't have small mistakes on my side, on the pit crew side, on Martin's side, mechanical issues, or it's just so many little things. And I feel like, that happened again last year. 2021, we had a really good year and we won all those races, and, we were within 20 laps of winning the championship until we had to make that last pit stop. And to go through last year and you had so many ups and downs, and we had so many good races that just didn't, we didn't win. We had issues, multiple issues. And I said to someone, I think before that last race at Homestead, second or third to last race, I think we found every way to lose a race this year. And literally we found another way that day by getting turned on pit road. So while leading. So, I think hopefully looking forward to this year, I hope it's going to be a lot better. I feel confident.
It has started well for you, mate, in terms of the win at Los Angeles at the Coliseum. That must have felt damn good, did it?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we have a different vibe, a different attitude this year. Martin he's mad, as he said, and he's ready to go. And I feel like we have a point to prove. And to come out there and have such a good car and a strong showing, was a great way to start the year, and just gave everybody confidence, that what we had been doing and what we're doing is still the right thing. And, although it wasn't a championship race, it still, meant a lot. And, hopefully we can carry that through. And, especially like last year there, we were terrible. We were just miserable at that race, and to turn it all around and have the best car was a really good feeling.
You've been really good with your time, and I'm conscious we're over the time allocation that you've given us. So let's power through a few to finish, so I don't hold you up, mate. Firstly, are you, if we're to draw a parallel, are you more Harry Hogg from Days of Thunder or Doc Hudson from the Cars movie in terms of playing crew chief? Which would you be more aligned with, or neither?
Oh, gee. Probably Harry Hogg. Harry Hogg.
Legend.
Yeah.
Legend. How long can you keep doing this for, James? How long do you want to keep doing it for? Are there, Supercars are about to get into Gen 3. Is there a want maybe one day to come back and try and win another Bathurst? What do you think?
No desire to come home.
No? You're entrenched there now?
I'm entrenched here. So, as soon as I can get my citizenship, I'll be signing up. And I want to be here for a while. There's a lot I want to accomplish. There's still, I feel like, I just don't feel like going back there would really do me any good, to be honest. I think there's still a lot to learn here, and it's just, this is where it's at. You know what I mean? Like, outside of Formula One, I don't really think of any other series you want to work in other than NASCAR. Like this, people may think they're, technically not superior, like a bit agricultural, but behind the scenes and the technology involved and the things we do is, you're not really going to get to be able to do that in any other racing series.
My buddy Lee Diffie tells me he was at a bar in New York City with you on the day that the call came through to say that you were going to be crew chief for Martin Truex Junior. And he vividly recalls the pride on your face, mate, but he's hugely proud of the fact that you've never changed. You've always kept, as you said before, from your mum, your feet on the ground. You are still, despite the challenge, despite how big the job is, the same James Small to this day. Yeah.
I try to be like that. So, but yeah, that was a cool day hanging out with Diff. And, he gets a little loose, so he led me astray. So I think we finished the night off with a few Diff G&Ts or whatever he calls them.
Yeah.
But, Lee's been, he's been a great asset over here for me, and he's helped me with a lot of things. And, we talk a lot, and he's introduced me to some other great people and other Australians that I've met, and just to see what he's done over here is just incredible. Like, I don't think people in Australia actually understand how successful and big Lee Diffie is in America. Like, he does everything. Yep. He's one of NBC's main guys, so it's incredible to, just see what he's been able to accomplish. And, I'm thankful that, I can call him a friend.
Fittingly, mate, we're proud of what you've accomplished too, and we know that you've got more that you want to achieve on the way there. I think you two were at an Aussie bar that night, so that made a lot of sense in New York. And for me, mate, this conversation today brings us full circle. I think somewhere in the memory banks, I did an interview with you as a young go-karter at Geelong way back when, and now here you are in the States doing amazing things, mate. Congratulations, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast to talk with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Rusty's Garage is written and presented by me, Greg Rust. Series editor and producer is Thomas Dullard. Audio production by Link Kelly. If you've got a guest suggestion, get in touch with me via social media. The Garage, that's where a journey begins with a tank full of passion-fueled stories.